I am transgender. Growing up, it was scary. I didn't have anyone to talk to. My family didn't understand. It's a struggle to be real. Society, for some reason, doesn't want people to be real. I've come across a lot of transgender children in the world, and I want to do everything in my power to make sure that they don't go through the things that I went through. It doesn't matter what gender you are. It doesn't matter what you look like. It just matters, are you a good person? I want someone to know it's okay to be transgender. It's okay to discover that you're not transgender if you think you are. It's okay to be gender fluid. It's okay to be gender neutral. It's okay to be gender non-conforming. It's okay to be male. It's okay to be female. It's okay to be gay, straight, lesbian. It's okay. Just please be a good person. Be kind. Hello everyone, I'd love to introduce you to a wonderful friend of mine. This is Gavin Grey. Gavin was one of the counselors with me at Camp Aranutic, and we bonded very tightly with each other. And today, like I said, we are going to be talking about a subject that can be a little bit... I was told by my mother growing up, there's three things you don't talk to other people about: sex, politics, and religion. Well, we're talking about religion today, so that's what I would like to discuss with him. And first of all, I just want to say to you, Gavin, I am so glad that you're here, because I remember a month ago at Camp Aranutic when you were called up on stage for the juggling act with Kate Great, and the transformation to watch you be the shy person that went up on stage to be a part of her act till the end of that exact same act. I mean, it couldn't have been 20 minutes later. There was this transformation that took place in you of being uncomfortable there to owning the show almost instantly. And now you're here in front of a camera, and I appreciate this growth that is going on with you, and thank you for letting me see it and be a part of it. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you for, playing a role in my being able to be here, not only physically inviting me, but also just being a person who brings out that authenticity in me and in other people. And I know we talk a lot about Camp Aranutic because it's important to all of us in the sense that we met there, but also as a transgender man myself, I saw firsthand what an environment where people can come and just be themselves and not have to worry about the societal pressures or expectations or whatever else you have to worry about when you're out in the real world. I saw what that did for me in my life as an adult. So I know it's doing wonders in the lives of the kids there too, because they're getting that exposure and that atmosphere right from a young age. But it's absolutely true that had this interview or this opportunity been presented maybe 2 months ago, I don't know if I would have been able to do it. But it is being in that atmosphere and being around other people who hold themselves to a standard of authenticity and realness that it's like contagious.
It is contagious.
It comes out in other people too. So yeah, I definitely thank you for having me here, and it's always fun to spend time with you. So.
Always. We had a wonderful meal together last night getting ready for this.
We did. With
Rebecca Miner, who you met in a previous episode.
And the night before too.
And
we went out.
Yeah.
It was
so
fun.
we really are pretty good friends. And,
it's not just for the cameras.
No, it's not. Yet. Eventually it might be, but not yet. But this topic that we're about to discuss is, for me personally, one of the two things that prevented me from transitioning at an earlier age.
Me too.
I'll be perfectly honest with you. It was one of the two things. The knowledge that I would leave my family and lose them was the first bit of information, and then the fact that I had to work through this fact that I might go to hell according to my family's Southern Baptist belief system for who I am. And that's a scary proposition when you're a child, isn't it? That's a huge thing to be thrust upon a kid as a way to control us to not be authentic, and it was very effective at the time, except it chips away a little bit at your soul.
Right. Well, for me, the two were interconnected as well. This prospect of losing my family and the prospect of church and religion and God and hell and all these things, because my religious upbringing was rooted in my family. Before I knew what the word transgender was, I knew from a very young age, okay, there's going to be a point in time where I'm disjointed from the family because they hold these beliefs, and because, you know, there's no, when you grow up in a deeply, you know, at least in my experience, a deeply religious, Bible-based household, there's no room for debate. This is the way it is, this is the law of this house. And, you know, when you try, and I don't think there is room for negotiation or reasoning in the mind of someone who views this one way of living life as the way. You know, there's no wiggle room. You can't. And then that leaves you in a position, especially as a young person, with, okay, well, I'm not even going to bother having this conversation because I already know how it's going to go. So yeah, I absolutely felt a lot of that same feeling, and watching your segment speaking about religion in your life, about praying every night, I said out loud, me too, because I went through the same thing in that regard, where I think it was hard because I would go to church and I would actually feel a kinship with God, or so I thought. And I felt comfortable in church in one regard, where I was like, wow, I like being here. I feel something about coming here makes me feel good, and it makes me feel I have a spiritual experience here. But then I'd have to reconcile that with the fact that I'm still not embraced exactly as I am here. And then I would leave church and go home and have these moments of prayer where I said, okay, well, if you're, you know, if this is the way I'm supposed to live my life, and this is how you want me to be, speaking to God,
right,
why don't you just fix me? Why don't you just change? Like, I'm asking you for it. You say that if, you know, you come to me with an earnest heart, I'll help you. And okay, I'm here, I'm earnest, I'm pleading, I'm begging that you'll do anything, that you'll change this, that you'll fix it, whatever. And I came to realize in my adult life that the reason that prayer was never answered was because there was nothing wrong with me.
Exactly.
But when you're a kid and an adolescent, and there's already so much going on and so much changing, and you're confused and lost, you don't have that sense of awareness that, okay, you know, it's just, maybe I'm not even worth the prayer being answered because I'm so wrong at my core. And that's
that
tough.
was truly where I think that I came from. It was the reason that none of my prayers were answered was because I wasn't loved by God.
Right.
I mean, that's what, I think that's what a lot of the, and I appreciate spirituality. I appreciate devotedness to your belief system. I truly do. I think it's a wonderful aspect of being a human and being real, being authentic. My parents are authentic.
Yep.
They are, in the sense that they're going to hold to that belief system.
Sure.
Now, other parts of their life were not authentic. And I think that that's what happens a lot of time with some of the more stringent faith-based people, is that their definition of authentic is strictly driven by blurbs of Scripture, even, not even in the entire Scripture of the Bible or any book of faith, the Torah, any book of faith. I think that what happens is you lose the authentic self trying to mold yourself into what this book says you are supposed to be as a human being.
Sure.
And I don't necessarily know that, I know for me personally that would not happen correctly. I know that I would not have, if I had followed the mold of the Bible, followed the guideline of it the way that my family did, well, A, I wouldn't be here talking to you. B, I don't know where I would be, because for the 40 years that I did try to follow that liturgical belief system, I was miserable. I turned to all kinds of drugs. It didn't matter that I went back to church and prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. Nothing was being answered, so God must not love me. And that's not true. The universe cares deeply for everybody. I mean, that's the thing that I've got from my life is that everybody's got a purpose. Everybody's got a reason to be here, and I hate that other people think that their reason to be here has to be your reason to be here also. And I see it changing, but I have to be honest, Gavin. I don't go back to church anymore, and I don't know that I will ever set foot in another church comfortably simply because of the scarring that happened in my past.
Sure.
And maybe it would be different if I gave it another chance up here somewhere else, but I'm so scarred from what happened in my past that it stunted my growth as a human, is what it did. And I don't like that growth is what humans are. I mean, we're evolution in process. We're transition from the day we're born to the day we pass away. We are constantly transitioning.
Right.
And I give you and I credit, because we weathered a tough little patch with that. And we've come out of it very compassionate.
Right.
Which a lot of people will not.
Right. You can always go either way.
You can always go either way.
Yeah.
So are you faith-based now, or?
I was actually just going to ask you the same thing, as far as, do you believe that there is a God, or are you not sure, or are you not, just while you're still talking about your experience before I move to mine?
Actually, I believe that there is an energy of the universe.
Okay.
That I don't know that it is one energy that is transforming out to everything else. I don't know if there's like one entity that is transforming energy to the rest of the universe, but I do think that there is energy of the universe, and I think this energy can be tapped into through prayer, through spirituality, and you can become faith-based. You can become spiritual, and I think that there's energy that is good, there's energy that is bad, and kind of depending on how you align your body is the way that you're going to be swept in that energy at that moment.
Sure.
And I think that like all of the great faith-based people that have been on the planet, Muhammad, Jesus, everybody, I mean, Abraham, Moses, just on and on, all of these faith-based people, I think the universe spit them out to us, in lack of a better word. The universe gave them to us as a guide to say, hey, these people can help you to become part of the positive energy and not the negative energy.
Right.
And so, yes, I do believe that there is something bigger outside of us.
Okay.
And I truly want to be a part of that energy, and I'm trying my best to do that.
Right.
But I'm not necessarily to the point anymore to where I think I have to go to a physical location to tap into that energy.
Sure. And I think that's, first of all, I in my experience, so I have to, I mean, and I've spoken with a lot of LGBTQ Christians or religious people over the years. And so I feel fairly confident in saying that there's enough of us that have shared this experience that I have to assume it's fairly common, that when you're raised in a faith-based home, whatever that faith may be, it's really common to feel a desire to connect with that in some way later in life, even after you've decided, okay, God wasn't condemning me. I'm not, there is nothing wrong with me. I don't need to change in order to live but you still feel that yearning. And I refer to myself as this in all regards of my life, not just a spiritual one, but I always just call myself humbly a work in progress, because I'm always changing, always growing. I feel like everyone has this obsession with having everything figured out, but if you have everything figured out, you have nowhere left to go. Exactly. So I have no desire to be all figured out. I'm happy to kind of keep growing and changing. So as far as my spirituality, that is definitely a big piece that I'm still navigating. One thing that I've kind of come to a pretty finite conclusion regarding is that I don't like the idea of religion, because religion is a man-made organization, institution that I think was founded by one, depending, each religion's different, but, sticking with the religion that I was raised, which was non-denominational Christian, it was this one group of men who wrote the Bible and who based those teachings and those words and those laws and things that they governed in the way things were at that time in their own experience. And when you think about the fact that so many people today in 2015 are basing their lives down to the letter on a book that was written how many years ago by one group of people, you know, it's ridiculous when you think about it that way. And when you consider all the other factors as far as language and translation and just the passage of time and the way that cultures change and times change. And I mean, I won't go into all of my little sub-theories, but you know, I'm fairly certain at this point that I won't ever subscribe to this idea of being religious, because religious to me means you're committing to live by a set of rules that was written by someone who we're not even sure how applicable that is. Right. Spiritual, absolutely, and I think that just is rooted in my upbringing. I always, when I would pray, not necessarily those prayers, but when I would pray about anything, I always felt that prayer was such like a special sacred time for me. Right. And I always, whenever I would pray or still pray to this day, you know, I treat it more like a conversation. It's not like a dear God in a formal type, you know, setting or a recitation of the Lord's Prayer or what have you. It's let's have this conversation. And for whatever reason, for better or for worse, I always did feel something very, you know, calming and centering in those moments. And I've actually gone to churches since. That was my first step, was once I, you know, had accepted my truth and begun to transition, even just socially. I started going to churches here in Massachusetts that are openly affirming LGBT, and not just like we pretend we're affirming, like literally on the front page of any of their literature says we, you know, welcome all members of the gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender community. I've been to churches where they do queer sermon series. There's drag queens, gay men, trans women giving sermon. I mean, so that's genuinely affirming. That's not just we're going to pretend we are to look a certain way. That's a really, and it was so interesting because I was there and I was excited to be there, and it was exciting in this whole way of, wow, places like this exist, and that makes me really happy. But I didn't feel that same, I guess, feeling of maybe being centered or connected as I had in my church growing up. And that was so hard for me to quantify. It was like, well, wait a sec.
You're like, what's going on?
Yeah, why now that I'm in a space where I could shout at the top of my lungs that I'm transgender and everyone would embrace me, why am I not? And so I think that is what maybe solidified that this, you know, it's not religion that's for me. And maybe, like you said, maybe that is because I was scarred and damaged and really, really deeply changed by what growing up in a religious household did to my self-esteem and my sense of self-worth for so many years, and that it put my life on hold, like you said.
It does. It just it stops. Everything else stops until you can almost work around that part of it. It feels like to me, like when you come to the conclusion, for me, that God no longer loves me, or never did love me, or considers me a joke, or whatever concept as a child that I'm going through to grasp with it and manage it, I stopped. I became stunted in my life. I did, because I am a spiritual person. I can go out in nature and sit and become closer to the universe and to the energy of the universe and to God, to Allah, to whatever it is.
Right.
And that's where I get my energy that everything's going to be okay, through that and through my friends, people like you and Rebecca and all of these people that I have in my life. That's kind of where my spirituality comes from now, is through the connections I've made with people that care, that are authentic or trying to become authentic, that understand that life is a transition. Like you said, we're never going to have it figured out. If anybody has it figured out, they're fibbing.
What's the point? Yeah.
They're fibbing, honestly, they're fibbing, and to be polite about it.
Right.
So I appreciate the journey. I
Yeah.
do. I appreciate the journey of this spirituality that I'm trying to discover. I appreciate that I can be sitting at a disc golf course, looking down a fairway, and the universe touches me right then and says, hey, I'm with you, you're going to be okay. And some of the more important things that have come to me in life have been in nature.
Yeah.
The ability to do this TV show, the ability to move to Massachusetts. I mean, I literally packed my car and moved here, were all because I was in nature and was granted this bit of reprieve to where I could have clarity as to what my next step was. And I give the universe full credit for that. That wasn't me coming up with these thoughts on my own. This was the universe saying, I'm going to give you the courage, I'm going to put the people in your life that you're going to have there to make it, and here's what you're going to do in return for me, Kelly.
Right.
And that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm now in the point where I did get to come up here. The universe did provide me with wonderful friends. The universe did take care of me like it promised. Now it's my turn to do what I said I was going to do, which is to help transgender children. And because you know and I know that there are kids being raised exactly like we were.
Absolutely.
That are scarred, that are just as cracked as we were, and I'm not quite sure how to get through that religious barrier because it is powerful. It's a very powerful barrier that you and I are trying to kind of poke through to tell these kids and these parents, hey, it's okay to be transgender and spiritual, and God still loves you.
Right. I mean, I think there's always going to be those restrictions. I think there's always going to be those walls for people. I think there's always going to be the people who need to find chosen families as opposed to blood families. And by that I mean just accepting that the folks who, you know, bore and reared and raised you and share your bloodline, that doesn't necessarily have to be your family.
Correct.
You know, I mean, I feel like you're more of my family than my blood family, as are many of the folks that I've, you know, now met through, in only just a few short months ago. But I think that you said something really important about the journey. And I mean, you want to talk about a spiritual experience. I think your life, whatever religion you subscribe to or don't subscribe to, I mean, that's your spiritual experience. That is, I could go back and I could unwish all of the awful things I went through, and it would so drastically change the course of who I became as a person that I could never do that. I could never go back and wish that hadn't happened,
Right.
despite how in those moments I would have wished for anything else.
Exactly.
And in those moments I would have, you know, there were times where I didn't know if I would see an end to the pain. You know, but I know that those were the moments that I felt most alone that actually defined me most as who I am. And I've often said this as well, that if I had been born as, you know, a cisgender male in the family that I was born into, I think it's a pretty safe assumption that I would not be nearly as empathetic and I definitely wouldn't be the person I am today.
Right.
You know, I would have been afforded every privilege that life could have offered me, raised in a family that, in an environment that said, the way you are right now is the right way to be. So would I necessarily have had the empathy for people who didn't fit into the mold? Would I I mean, I certainly wouldn't have had the awareness and the mindset and the firsthand knowledge that there are people out there struggling. And while of course I would like to think that I still would have been generally a good person, you know, being raised the way that my folks, you know, through the mindset, the way that they see the world,
Right.
That, you know, being trans is bad, being gay is bad, being, you know, and that's just really oversimplifying it, but that's the bottom line. What would have made me, you know, expand my viewpoint and realize that, you know, there are people out, everyone is a person and everyone has value, and that we have work to do here. That's beyond, you know, just kind of going about your day, living your own life and saying everyone else fall by the wayside. So as much as it felt like a curse, and even honestly at times, you know, I still deal with a lot of you know, the dysphoria and things of that nature that make, you know, being a transgender person hard, even today in 2015 as an adult. You know, at the same time, I couldn't go back and undo it or change it, because it's being trans that's made me who I am in so many really important ways. There's a lot of ways where I'm so much more than that, and it's certainly not the only thing that defines me, but it's defined my experiences in a way. And, you know, especially as a trans male, I have this unique viewpoint that I know a lot of people reject, of I know what it's like to walk through the world as a woman. And there's something that I think a lot of other, you know, trans men or whatnot like to ignore that or reject it or forget all about it or not own it in any way. And I've realized that it's owning that is going to give me the ability to help foster some more change, just in the sense of, you know, I know what a lot of, I never felt like a woman, I never identified as a woman. I feel the same way as you in terms of female to male doesn't sound quite right, because I always felt male. I mean, anatomically, sure, that's a different story, but, you know, you don't need to feel a certain way to have the world read you as that way. So the world read me as a female, so I was treated as a female. So I know what it's like to have my intelligence underestimated or undermined because I'm a woman. I know what it's like to be over-sexualized because I'm a woman. I know a lot of what women go through. So now that I'm living my authenticity as a male, who unfortunately my voice is listened to and valued sometimes more than my female counterparts, I can use that privilege and that firsthand knowledge that I had and actually make some change.
Exactly.
You know, and I think it's a huge responsibility, and I think we all owe it to ourselves and to the world around us to not pretend that responsibility doesn't exist, or that, you know, we don't have that ability, but to embrace it and to own it and to move forward with it. So
yeah, and just the spiritual growth of it, as you were saying, I wouldn't wish anything different on my life either. All of the hardships, all of the love, all of the beautiful things, all of the horrible things that have happened in my life have created the person that is now sitting right here in this chair wanting to change the world. Just like all of that stuff has created in you a person that's sitting right here that's wanting to help these children. And at the time, you're right, we didn't see that there was a bigger picture to it.
Sure.
But I believe that the universe did this to get me ready for this moment. I think that everything in my life has led to each moment that I'm living at that very now. And I kind of feel like that's just not a transgender phenomenon.
No.
I kind of believe that that's every human being on this planet, that every bit of your life experience, spiritually especially, leads you to where you are now. So if you're an atheist, it leads you to a certain way in life. If you're a Muslim, if you're a Christian, if you're evangelical, it all leads you. It's one of the more powerful aspects of being a human, in my opinion, is spirituality. I mean, breathing air is huge, eating food is huge, but then when you start getting into things for the mind, spirituality, it molded me. It truly, because of the effect that my family's religious and spirituality aspect, the way they treated me based on their upbringing, affected my upbringing. My upbringing has now made me want to volunteer at Camp Aeronautic and see these children and say, I've got to help them. It's not enough just to volunteer here once a year. I've now got to go do more because of that burden that I thought was a burden, which actually wasn't on my life. And I think that that's one of the things that kept me going through all of this. Was there was times when I didn't want to be on this planet anymore, that I didn't want to be anything anymore. And anytime I would get to that rock bottom place, an angel would plop in my lap, for lack of a better word. Somebody would come along just then that would pick me up and say, you're going to make it. You're going to do this. I mean, I was mid-electrolysis and ran out of money because it's super expensive. I had a person donate laser time to me, so I had laser done for free from somebody that just happened to be an angel that came along and said, here's a person in need.
Right.
And whatever spiritual upbringing that they've had in their life created that moment where they wanted to help me. And it's all connections that are so much larger. People like to pretend like their past is their past. I mean, I look at pictures of my past, of me presenting as a boy with a baseball bat in my hand, and I look at that kid and I can see the sadness in the kid's eyes. I can see it. But now I understand that the universe was getting me ready for now, for this day, for this moment. And so it's hard to wish away something when you're where you're at and you're happy where you're at.
Right.
Because you understand. So I think that's a huge spiritual growth that you went through. I really do.
Yeah. I definitely think, like you said, every step leads us to where we wind up. I mean, and I don't think that's something that's just metaphorical. I mean, when it really does. You know, you can't just erase a certain point on a map and expect that you'll wind up from point A to point C. You know what I mean? You have to go through point B to get from A to B to C, and it all, you know, has some type of an effect. And I think the bottom line is, you know, you cannot have it all figured out as far as spirituality and what is my stance on that? Who am I talking to when I pray?
Right.
You know, who are those angels, or who sent those angels at those various points in my life that, you know, interfered? You know, my religion too, honestly, it wound up being that fear of mortality that also kept me from, you know, taking my life too, because it was that very upbringing of, you know, okay, well, it's a sin, you know? So what if I didn't have that religious bearing on me at that time? I might not even be here talking to you right now. So it's, you know, you have to be grateful for those little interferences. And I think what I've had to become comfortable with is knowing that it's okay to not have all the answers. And then I think that's part of it. I think that's part of faith. You know, the word faith implies that you're trusting in something that you can't necessarily see. And whether that's a specific deity or religious being, or whether that's just this idea that wherever I am right now is leading me to where I need to be next, and I'm okay with that. I think that is the one thing that everyone needs to accept to find peace, is that it's okay to not necessarily know the answer to this, but I'm going to be okay anyway. So that's
It's a journey.
Yeah.
It's a journey that I wouldn't change for the world.
Right. And trust in the journey.
And trust in it. I mean, I come up here and look, we've not even known each other. We met, I was thinking about it, July 26th, maybe 27th. I remember it. You were sitting by yourself at a table, if I'm not mistaken, and I came and talked to you. I'm not sure, but it seems like we just started talking then, and that connection happened. And I feel like I've known you a lot longer than since July 26th. I really do. And I think that's, once again, the universe saying, listen, you two are going to become friends, and I've got things I want you all to talk about on Acton Public TV, so here we go. And I mean, it's almost, it can almost be looked at that way. It's a hard concept for me to understand that a faith-based family could not love a child.
Yeah.
And that's truly what it boiled down to for me, is I truly don't think that my family loved me. I think that they were ashamed of me. I think that they didn't know what to do with me, so rather than try to understand, there wasn't any resources to understand, there was no way for them to understand, they just fell right into the Bible as their only guide for this.
Right.
And sadly for them, they missed out on me.
Exactly.
Sadly for me, I will always have, like you said, there's always going to be a part of my past that I can't erase. And sadly for me, sometimes that part is hard to overcome.
Yeah.
There are times when I'm knee buckled on the ground, not knowing what to do, because it's just so big. And it's mind-boggling that the universe has put me on this. I would not have expected a year ago to be anywhere near like this. And I give credit to trusting the universe, to faith, as you said.
Right.
It's 100%. I put faith in what I was being told by the universe, and it's working out.
Right.
And the hardest thing that faith told me was to be authentic. That's the hardest thing on this planet, I believe, for a human being, is to be real. Oh my goodness, it just is, because I see what's going on in my world just trying to be authentic. I have to now decide, do I tell during an interview, do I out myself? Do I tell after I get the job, do I out myself? Do I not out myself at all? And these are all faith-based spiritual decisions that I'm making based on partially my upbringing on those. And you can't escape it.
Right.
You just can't escape you can own your past, which is what I'm trying to do now, but you can't escape it. You can't pretend like it didn't happen or become so bitter about your past that you lose focus on the now.
Right.
It's hard to do, but
Yeah.
you have to.
Yeah, and I think part of this idea of, because my family no longer in my life either because of my transition, and there's definitely moments where it hits you and you suddenly feel the weight of that, and sometimes it's seeing other people connect with their families, or for me, whenever I find myself in a precarious situation, knowing that I don't have that safety net where I could call, where my sister, for example, could call my mom or dad and say, hey, like, I'm in a jam, can you help me out? And just knowing that I don't have that same luxury, and then looking at it and saying, well, why? Because I'm who I am, and I think it's those moments where the pain and the grief, because it's a loss, and you have to grieve that loss, and when it's an ambiguous loss, or it's someone who's still here, I think that grief process is ongoing, maybe not constant, but ongoing. But for me, the grieving kind of stops when I realize that to have them in my life still would be, I'm not the one who can change. It's up to them. The ball's in their court. I can't change who I am as a real, authentic person, but they can change their mindset should they choose to, but they're choosing not to. And, they're choosing this idea of it, whether it's appearances or whether it's, if we're talking about the Bible and Christianity, and it's supposed to be this idea of God is love and everything is love thy neighbor. Okay, well, you're not loving someone if you're trying to hold them back and keep them from their growth and disrespecting their very essence as a human being. And when I look at it that way, it's like, well, it's a no-brainer then. I can't have that toxic influence in my life. I was my own worst enemy for so long because I was trying to keep my own self down. I wasn't letting myself grow, and I can't let other influences in my life willfully like that. And it's hard that it's my family, and it'll always be sad that it has to be that way. But I also know that regardless of what relation they are to me as a person, if that's their objective, is to hold me back or to change me, I have people who like me just the way I am. So why would I, you know what I mean? And it made me so much stronger, from that young age when I might not have had the word for it yet, but I knew that someday I'm going to be on my own, at least as far in relation to my family. So it made me work 10 times harder. We're both strong, independent people. And would we be this level of strong and independent had we not gone through that?
Not at all.
No.
Not at all.
So,
It's a tough one. The kids at camp, faith has changed so much. You know what I mean? A church, the concept for them of what faith is probably totally different in their family now, because they're in this place of acceptance. They're in this place of growth. And it's hard to overcome that rigidity that probably the generation above them, their parents, were feeling that religious pressure.
Sure.
And so for these parents to step outside of this box of religious and spiritual downplaying, keeping people conforming, for them to step outside of it and embrace their children and love their children is one of the most magical things I've ever seen.
Right.
It really is, to watch these parents come up to you and say, thank you for helping my child.
Yeah.
And all I did was make sure their kid didn't fall playing gaga and scrape their knee. You know, that's, I mean, obviously it's a lot deeper than that.
Right.
But I mean, that's what these parents are seeing from the counselors that are helping their children.
Right.
So I like to think that the children's faith maybe won't be as tested
Right.
as ours were, in the sense of being transgender. I'm sure there's going to be other tests, plenty
Sure.
of other tests of people's faith, but let's at least get rid of that one barrier to growth, because
Right.
that shouldn't even be a barrier.
Right. And well, and isn't it interesting that the Bible hasn't changed since then? What's the difference? The difference is in people's willingness to adapt and to account for the changes in time and to account for the new information that we have. It doesn't need to be that if you're raised in this certain faith that that you can no longer make the assumption that because someone's Christian, they're going to be homophobic, transphobic, sexist, whatnot. But that's a choice. And that's a choice that needs to come with the time. And how did these parents learn? They learned from having a transgender child and allowing them to be their authentic selves and to valuing the happiness of their child over, centuries old text in a book. That's really what it comes down to. The text hasn't changed.
Yep.
And would their mindset be what it is if they didn't have this transgender child teaching them? Probably not. But it's that you have to make that choice. I think you need to put yourself above any institution that you subscribe to and say, how does this resonate for me? And I know for a lot of people that goes against the very idea of religion, and that's why I don't like religion as an institution, because it doesn't allow that freedom of thought. But the choice is always yours, So I'm just hoping people will start making better choices.
Me too. And we're seeing it. It's not all doom and gloom.
No.
It's not. I mean, we're seeing true growth from children.
Yeah.
I'm seeing true growth from some of my faith-based friends. One of my dearest friends in Tennessee.
That's right. She called you, right, and apologized.
Yeah, she called me and apologized for it's hard to describe. She called to apologize for not accepting the authentic me, which is just mind-blowing. That why would you have someone in your life that you're wanting to change? Why not have the person in your life that you like how they are, and if they choose to change, you go with them on it because you like that person, rather than being there and saying, you've got to change, Kelly, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, I'm your friend, but you've got to do this.
Yeah.
And it was important for me to hear her make that turnaround and say,
Yeah.
I do love you. I do want you to continue to grow. And now she wants me to go to church every day, which won't happen. But but she's accepting that it's okay for a transgender person to go to church now.
Right. And that's a whole other plane of awareness that now she's on.
And then at the time.
Just because you're in her life and you're living your life, truly, people, again, that's contagious. People will respond to that.
Yep.
So that's why I think it's more important. I used to live as stealth, meaning I was not out as transgender. And there were certain parts of my life that were easier because of that, but then there was always a part of me that felt like I was not fulfilling some type of responsibility that I had, which is to let people know that people who are convinced that all transgender people are bad people, those are people that know me and like me before, so I think I respect everyone's decision to make their own choice. If they feel like they need to live as stealth, to live safely, happily, freely, then by all means. But as far as me and my transition and my journey, my growth as a person are concerned, after this summer especially, I'm realizing that and that was part of my ability to be here today. Had I still be living as stealth, I wouldn't be doing this, because I feel like this is more important than, my ability to maybe walk through the world a little less inhibited in certain senses. And I think that's a choice everyone needs to make, but I think by making this choice, we're hopefully going to help people and maybe change some minds and hearts.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Fingers crossed. Well, I appreciate you coming today to talk to me for this. I know you've got a busy schedule, and I mean, this is the Gavin that I have come to know. The man is always on the go. He's always doing things, and you were right. We kind of feed off of each other's energy now. It's like, holy cow, look what they're doing. I better step my game up, and then you'll look at them and they'll think, holy cow, look what they're doing. I better step my game up now.
Oh yeah.
And it's a magical thing that's happening this year, and I feel fortunate to be a part of it. I really and truly do, and I hope that somehow or another we continue to do it, Gavin, because what other greater thing there is than to help other people?
You said it.
None that I know of.
Amen, right?
Okay, well,
I love
thank you for coming. I love you too. Do you want to share anything with anyone? Or
any last words?
Any last words of wisdom or inspiration?
One thing that I said at family camp that I think resonated with a lot of people, family camp was another part of Camp Aeronautic where the families of the trans kids came up and spent the weekend. And I spoke on a panel where I was just answering questions for the families. And the question was, what do you wish you had known before what do you wish someone told you before you transitioned? And I think this is just it's a general life lesson. I think it can apply to anyone, regardless of whether you're trans or not. But my answer to that was that authenticity often has a high price, but it's always worth it in the end. So
there you go. I like it. See, I told you you'd be hearing the word authenticity a lot in my shows.
Yeah.
Thank you all for staying here with us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you, Gavin, for being here. And be safe, everyone, and be real. Bye. We did it, my friend. We did it.
That was good.